Welcome to Bite Size Bios. This is meant to be a mini-sode that will accompany HDTH. Every week, I will pick a person from history and dive into their lives. All right, welcome back to another episode of Bite Size Bios, BSB. This week, we're going to learn about Grigori Rasputin. And I did not know much about this guy going in, like next to none. I knew he was kind of weird looking and that he was connected to Russia in some way. That is literally about it, even though I do own the man's biography. I obviously did not read it. Before we get to that, as always, this is the mini episode for HCTH, so we got to talk about last week's topic, tattoos. That was also a subject that I knew little about. And if you listen to the episode, then you know that I actually don't have any tattoos, which is probably why I know nothing about tattoos. We found out that they were common basically in all cultures and civilizations, and that most of the early ones were used as some form of acupuncture or to help with childbirth, especially in Egypt. The next evolution saw them being used as a way to mark criminals, and that is where the criminal aspect of tattoos really begins to take shape, because we see in multiple civilizations that is the way they mark their criminals, with some sort of tattoo. We talked about with the Russians, it's on their face. A lot of times it is on their face. They mark them with the word criminal basically on their face. And they actually, the people would take it and flip it and make it a, kind of a thing, like a rite of passage or a term of endearment for them, that it's a way that they could, say we're criminals, but we choose to be these guys, but they were forced into that. And as always, if you like what you hear here, as I would say, there is more than where that came from over at hcdthappen.com. There you will find transcripts as well as the works cited. There was also a blog with interesting articles written by yours truly. Be sure to like and subscribe wherever you listen to this podcast. It really helps the pod grow. The goal is to be top 100 history podcasts on Apple Podcasts. Maybe by the end of the year. Who knows? We'll see. Give us 5 stars if you feel so inclined. Or if you want to give us 2 stars, explain why you didn't want to give us 5 stars. That is fine as well. But without further ado, as we're known to do here, we'll get to the episode. All right. So we are here to talk about Grigori Rasputin. And we find out that he was a wild boy. I did not know half of the things that I have written down before I did this research. So we'll hop into it. So old Rasputin was born in a small village called Pokry. It's a Russian place somewhere in Siberia, basically. And according to the records, he was born on January the 21st of 1869. There are not that many records about his parents. His father's name was Yefim. He was born in 1842, I think in the same area. And his mother's name was Anna, which you would assume probably is like Anna. And I think I can get her last name is Parshukova. Got it, right? And so they were married. His parents married in 1863. And his father was a government carrier. He would ferry people back and forth between a couple towns. He also, what else did he do? He did something else. Oh, he was a church elder as well. Yeah. So Grigori, I love saying Grigori. It's like not saying Greg. It's so close to saying Greg, but not. I mean, I guess maybe you are. So Rasputin did not actually really go to school. He was illiterate, which is pretty common for the people during that time and in that area. That wasn't school was not very important to them. But he did make a reputation for being basically just what they call licentious, having licentiousness. I think I may have mispronounced that, but it's like having sort of like lewd behavior, like being just kind of and so the lewd behavior is actually what earned him the name Rasputin, because I think his actual last name is Yefimovich, which if you know over there just means like son of Yefim. But like his name, that we all know him, it just means debauched one. It's Russian for debauched one. And he got married at the age of, I believe it was 18, ended up having like almost 9 or 10 kids with this woman who just stayed in the small town that they were in and never like came to like St. Petersburg and stuff, which when I read that, I was, I guess not all women are the same. I feel like some women would have been like, nah, us and the kids are coming, bro. We're going to, St. Petersburg and Moscow with you. Because when he went to those places, he got loose. But yeah, even before he married her, he was into some stuff. They say this is purported, not actually reported, that he was into maybe like orgies and stuff like that, and like in like the woods at nighttime with this group that was called the Kilisty, which is actually a Christian offshoot of Russian Orthodoxy. But they believed that, I believe it was that you had to purge your body of sin in some way. And this all happened in the woods, and then it somehow led to an orgy. I'm not sure how it connects, but I'm sure they have the literature if you want to check it out, because they said it's been around actually until, I think it's still around. It may not be practiced very very much, but I think there is still a small sect. Let's see. So that's the beginning of his debauchery. Oh, his wife's name was Praskovia Dubrovna. It's a solid name. I just want to get that in there. And they married on February of 1887. But like I said, she stayed in that small town where they were at, and he just kind of went all throughout Russia and was doing his thing. He started to basically develop a following around the time that he left the town. And there is like a small story about how he maybe even did, or why he had to leave the town. They said he stole a horse. And that may or may not be true. And then he went and stayed with some Christians, and the Christians were like, you should really go off and, convert people and stuff like that. So he did. Before I get too far, he actually only had 7 children. Just want to get that right. But 3 of them only survived. I don't know why I said 9 or 10. It just seemed like a lot. No, I think that's why, because he was, I think, the 9th child, I think, of his family. I think that's what I read. I got the 9 from somewhere. And so by the early 1900s, Rasputin had developed a small circle of followers. They were primarily his family members and other local peasants who prayed with him on Sundays. And so, he would, once he had developed this, like I said, he would leave actually his small town and go to, I believe it was St. Petersburg first, and he would meet this guy named Arky. God, these names, man. If you listen to this podcast, that is my Achilles heel. It's like, why can't people just be named like Jason and stuff, or whatever? Not just, or Richard. I think Richard's pretty simple to say. But the guy's name was Archimandrite Theophan. And he was an inspector of theological seminary, and he was kind of the guy who he was kind of the guy who brought Rasputin into the inner circle of like Russian aristocracy. Kind of, he was so impressed with Rasputin that he invited him into his home, and he became one of Rasputin's most important and influential friends in St. Petersburg, and this is what allowed him to get into the salons, right, which is where people would just kind of go and talk. The really rich people would gather for religious discussions. So this is what kind of got him in the door, and everybody's like, yo, who's that dude Rasputin? Like, who was that debauched one? And he, if you haven't seen pictures, if you don't know much about him, he was a very disheveled looking guy, a very, very weird looking guy. Like, he basically mastered the art of looking weird, and I mean that. Like, they said he could dilate his pupils like on like call, which is like, what? Who? Like, this dude is really out there, to the point where they make his eyes like look black and like freak people out. But like, so he was, very dirty, scruffy, piercing eyes, but very charismatic. And there was something that people were drawn to. Like, the ladies did actually love him. LL Cool R. Basically, ladies love cool Rasputin. But so he gets into the salons, he starts talking to the rich people, and they're just like, wow, I really like what he's doing. And then that leads to him actually meeting the Tsar of Russia, Tsar Nicholas. And he meets him at the Peterhof Palace. And the Tsar actually wrote down in his diary the day he met Grigori, or Rasputin. I probably would too, the day I met a guy like that. But he said he had met, in his diary, he said he had made the acquaintance of a man of God. That's basically what Rasputin was saying that he was. He was kind of basically, I don't know if he was saying he was Jesus incarnate, or basically that he was just like the next coming of the Lord, essentially. And so he begins his work as a faith healer for the Tsar's family, because their son Alexei was suffering from hemophilia, which hemophilia is a condition that keeps the blood from clotting. So even if you get like the smallest like cut, there's a chance of you bleeding out. And even weirder, like he implants himself into this family, and he does like the kids love him. They're trading telegrams or whatever when he's gone and stuff. And he even calls the Tsar and Tsarina Mama and Papa. This is a grown man with like 3 kids calling another grown man Papa. That in itself is a little weird. He was a very divisive figure in the Russian court. But the Russian court had a propensity to have occult like clairvoyant type people. Like Rasputin wasn't the first one in there that they were trying to believe this guy was some otherworldly figure. Like, he was just like the next one, who caught on, basically, which is something that I thought was interesting, because you would think if you didn't that he came in and just blew them away. Like, they're kind of already people who just like, I don't want to say like, I don't know. It's like believing in ghosts and then seeing a ghost, it's not that wild if you already believe that they're there. But if you don't believe in ghosts and you see a ghost, it will probably blow your mind. You know what I mean? That's how I thought it was when Rasputin was coming into the court. But these guys were already like, yeah, dudes see the future anyway. So like, what do you see? And so he just kind of ends up taking over. You know, I mean, not taking. There's different accounts to say whether he was making decisions and stuff. He definitely got to that point towards like the 1915 time. That was when World War I was going on, and Tsar Nicholas had to go and fight, you know, with his people, the Russian people, out on the front line. So that kind of left, you know, the decisions to be made by the Tsarina, and it was said that he was probably influencing her, you know, mentally, maybe even physically, who knows. And but, you know, this guy was doing this stuff the whole time, and I would say similar to like most sex offenders. Like, there were people being like, hey, that guy's doing some stuff, and I don't know if you've seen it, but he probably shouldn't be doing that. You know, and everybody was like, nah, but he's a man of God, you know? Like, there are some stories, man. There are some stories that I would recommend you check out, some documentaries that you almost just can't believe it. There's a story, I don't even know, because this podcast isn't like that. I don't really like to get down in the dumps too much here. But, you know, I'm not even going to mention it. But if you are into some weird, sexually based Christianity documentary information, it's out there. So yeah, he reached his pinnacle of power in like 1915, and he would even have the ability to like appoint church officials, cabinet members. He would even sometimes make military decisions, you know. But going back to talking about the people who were like, hey, he shouldn't be doing that. Whenever the Tsar and the Tsarina would hear about, you know, them telling him basically whatever Rasputin was doing, they'd be like, nah, dude, and they would send him off to some other place, like banish them basically. Like the nanny of the Tsars said that she got raped by Rasputin, and then they sent her away, which is very 20th century when you think about women's rights, but still, it's like it was the Tsarina who did it. All right, so now we're going to talk about an assassination attempt on him, and then his actual assassination, and then I have like one or two odd facts about this man, and that'll pretty much be it. So in June of 1914, when he was back home in that small town that starts with a P that I have a hard time saying, Pokrovskoye. Wow, I feel like I did that one pretty well. But he was sitting hanging out, and there was this former prostitute who, she'd had her own rough life. I think they cut this woman's nose off, which is just horrific. But so she had become a friend under a monk who used to be cool with Rasputin, but is no longer cool with Rasputin. So she felt like she had to, you know, kind of go at this guy because she's a follower of the monk that he's beefing with, basically. And she runs at him and starts stabbing him up. You know, she stabs him in the stomach and a bunch of times, and thinks that she's really killed him. Even digs in this man's stomach and pulls his intestines out of his stomach. You know what I mean? Which you would think if you get that deep in it, he probably is dead. She even, you know, she's said to have screamed, "I have killed the Antichrist." But after surgery, Rasputin bounces back. He's back, y'all. But his daughter stated that in her memoirs that he was never really the same. Which, I mean, would you though? Would you be the same if someone pulled your intestines out of your stomach, even if you're not the Antichrist? That's going to change a few things. I feel like it would. So with his actual death, he was invited to a dinner and fed food that had cyanide in it, and it didn't kill him. And everybody was like, what? Like, what are we going to do next? So they go and get a gun, and then they shoot him, and then they go back to the party, which is one of the most gangster things I think I've heard in this whole documentary. But then he comes back down with a doctor, you know, and checks to see if he's a pulse, if, you know, Rasputin has a pulse, and Rasputin wakes up, and he wakes up, and they kind of tussle for a second. So the guy runs back upstairs to like get a gun and tell everybody that he's still here, and then he's gone, right? So he dips out, and they find him. I think, where do they find him? A little bit further. Well, yeah, they found him on the palace grounds, but out of the actual house. And so they shot him again. They beat him up. They shot him a bunch of times. They shot him in the head this time. Like 5 dudes shot him, in addition to like one guy shooting him. And they wrapped him up, and this was the craziest part to me in the story when I was hearing it, because like you think all this stuff happened like forever, 100, 200 years ago, and like, and you hear all this, and they're like, and then they put him in a car, they put him in the trunk of a car, and I was like, wait, what? But this is the early 20th century. Cars existed. These were rich people. They had cars, so they wrapped this dead dude up, who they thought was dead, put him in the trunk of a car, drove him to this river, threw him in this freezing river. That pretty much killed him. But they said when they found him, like, he had water in his lungs, which said maybe he's probably still alive when they threw him in the river, and that his arms were frozen in a way that looked like it was pushing up because he was thrown into an icy kind of river, like he was trying to push through the ice to actually get through. So it's like this guy just almost could not die, but he died. Let's see. That's about all I want to mention about Rasputin. I'm glad I was able to get this episode off because I was worried, but I got three facts for you about him, and we will get out of here. He was reported to pick his own boogers and eat it in front of at the aristocracy. Just no shame, just all about it. Just And then the second one is he would sometimes walk around with shackles on his feet in order to feel pain on purpose. He was really into that. I don't think I mentioned that earlier. He was into like self-flagellation, which is like hitting yourself to feel good, I think is what it is. That's broad strokes, but it's something to that effect. And the third one that I have for you is that, and I have to check on this, and I think I will. His penis is on display in a museum. I think they said in Russia somewhere, which tops for me is very high up there. I've never heard anything like that. I don't know. I didn't know they were displaying penises anywhere of any kind. In any one. Okay, yeah. All right, that has been another episode of Bite Size Bios. We learned a lot about old Rasputin, and I will say I have looked into that claim of his penis being on display. There is one on display. The jury's still out as to whether or not that's actually his or not. Some people say it's that of a cow or a bull or something like that. It is massive. But yeah, if you love what you heard here, there's more where that came from over at htthappen.com. You will always find a written version of what you just heard, as well as photos and videos to help me create the episode. There's a works cited page there as well. Like and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. As I always say, give us 5. If you love us, give us 2. And tell us why you don't want to give us 5. Love that as well. As always, thank you for pressing play, and we'll see you in a couple days with the next episode of HT